Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Miami Book Hub. I am your host, J. Adrian Betancourt, urban planner by day, author and explorer of all things by night, and podcast host on occasion, like right now. Thank you for joining us once again. This is Miami's home for readers, writers, and resources. And with me today is a special guest that has been all of those things and probably continues to be. Her name is Ana Veciana-Suarez, and she is a former journalist, or potentially still a journalist. I'm not sure if you're still
dabbling.
We'll go with journalist, author, mother, grandmother, and just all-around wonderful person. Ana, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to, just connect with writers in Miami in any way.
Now, I said you were a former journalist, even though you continue to write, but that's because you have such an amazing career in journalism, dating back, and we could go through maybe all the publications that you've written for, but what you may be most noted for here in our community is the Miami Herald, where you had a regular column and you wrote about literature and maybe other things. So tell us about your journey. How did you start as a writer, and how did that transition eventually into becoming an author?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like I'm almost coming full circle in my career. When I was younger, I've always loved to read, but I started very early to write. And of course, this was shocking to my parents because if you're exile, immigrant, or refugee, anything in the arts is not what you want your child to pursue.
You need to be an engineer.
And yes, and I had come from a family of doctors, accountants, very left brain. But I always loved to read. I was always reading, and I loved to write. And when I was in high school, my English teacher suggested I join the high school newspaper, which I had not really thought of doing. And I did, and I loved it, and the rest was history.
Yeah. Where'd you go to school?
I graduated from Immaculata-La Salle here in Coconut Grove. We've had quite a few important journalists, Ileana Bravo, Elliot Rodriguez, Gus Pupo, come from just my class. So, and I always loved newspapers. Now, I did continue my love for fiction writing. So, I wrote my first attempt, which just showed how ignorant I was. I was on maternity leave, and I decided, this is when I'm going to start my novel. Well, anybody who's had children know that that's like a non-starter. But so I actually didn't begin seriously writing fiction till about 1995. So I had this whole background in journalism, several decades in journalism.
Tell us about that. What did you do for the Herald?
So I started, as most journalists do, I started first at the Miami News, and then, within 4 years had moved to the Miami Herald. The Miami News, for the old Miamians, was our afternoon newspaper. Great training, great training for writing, thinking on your feet. And then I started as a news reporter, which is, kind of cutting your teeth. And I was general assignment. So I pretty much, from day to day, didn't know what I was going to do. I came in, I was assigned the story, and I worked on it. And then I worked my way through various things. I eventually became a feature writer and a columnist. And that's how I ended, as a feature writer and a columnist. And I think, to me, journalism is something I will always do because you have the immediate rush. Yeah. And you know this.
It's so important.
You will write for weeks and months before anybody's seeing what you write. And in journalism, it's pretty instantaneous.
Yeah.
So you have feedback, and I had come to depend on that.
Well, that's great. And then you moved on from the Herald and retired, or did you just...
No, I still work, much to my middle-aged children's dismay. So I still work. I'm a freelance medical writer for the University of Miami Medical School.
Okay.
And it was a steep learning curve. I kept saying, I should have listened more in biology class. And now I just love that. I have learned, and I'm constantly reading about all kinds of medical and scientific studies. And it's been fascinating. So in a way, maybe my parents who are deceased would have been happy. It speaks to all the doctors in the family.
Yeah, I'm sure not just writing about it. You become a wealth of knowledge on these
Yes,
topics,
you do.
Right? Okay, I know who to turn to next time I have an issue. So you said you wrote a couple of books prior to the one we're going to talk about in a second. Tell us a little bit about those earlier works.
So my first novel was The Chin-Kiss King. Took place in the Miami neighborhood I grew up in. And it was the story of three women and how they deal with the birth of a handicapped child to the granddaughter. So it's a granddaughter, a mother, and then of course the mother of the child. And it's for many reasons it's a book probably that will always be very close to my heart.
What inspired you to write that?
My sister, my middle sister, my late sister gave birth to a handicapped child with the same condition than this baby. And I saw her go through that and how the family dealt with it, how it changed people around it. And that's what it was. And of course, returning to the neighborhood that I grew up in was always fun. Then I also wrote, before this novel, a middle grade book that resulted from the first book. Scholastic had asked me to do something about the Cuban immigrant experience. And they had a series called Dear Diary, in which people wrote, writers who were immigrant themselves, wrote not necessarily about their personal experience, but about the experience of immigration.
May I ask, how old were you when you arrived here?
6 years old.
6 years. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So you don't have a lot of memories, I imagine, of Cuban.
No, and sometimes a lot of the memories I realize are stories that I heard from my parents' photos that I saw that I think get all kind of jumbled and intertwined with it. We all hear those stories and they become part of our memory.
Sure. All right. Well, let's talk now about the book of the hour. You see it there in front of you. It should be on the screen. It's behind both of us. Dulcinea. So tell us about Dulcinea.
So Dulcinea is the story of the fictional muse of Miguel Cervantes. So in other words, the woman who did not exist in real life, by the way, because I get this question a lot, but the woman who inspired Cervantes to write Don Quixote.
Okay.
And it's the story she receives a deathbed plea from Cervantes that he wants to see her one last time. And she leaves Barcelona and rides to Madrid. And it's not like taking the turnpike now. The roads were very dangerous. It took many days. So it's a dual timeline book. Part of it takes present her current journey across these dangerous roads. And the other timeline is her meeting Cervantes and becoming his lover.
And what inspired that one?
So back in the day, many, many years ago, when I was in high school, I took Spanish 4, and I had read Don Quixote in the original Spanish, which I don't think I could do now. I don't think I have the brain synapses to do it.
It's like the equivalent of reading Shakespeare. And
the original Spanish and everything. And I always thought I want to write about this woman who is a character who is always off the page. Yeah. She is, she plays a central part, but you only see her in fleeting scenes. Of course, it took me about 50 years to get to it. Partially, I didn't know much about 16th century, Spain, 16th and 17th Spain. So I knew it would involve a lot of research, and it did.
This was just an excuse for you to travel to Spain.
Yes. Well, I have family. So, my mother was born in Spain, went to Cuba after the Spanish Civil War. I think she was 10, 12 years old. And a big part of my father was born in Cuba, but he has a huge part of his family who still lives in the northeastern part of Spain known as Catalonia.
Yes.
So part of it is in Spain, in Barcelona. So I'm familiar because of having
even more
visited family.
Language, yeah.
Yeah, so it's another language and so on. So in a way, it was kind of an excuse to be able to
That's great.
To go.
I need to start writing a book about Italy so I could excuse a few visits there. I love Italy. And I'm curious, is the style of the book, the writing style, at all influenced by Don Quixote, or you're just in your own voice? And it has nothing...
It's really, and that was hard. It was a decision that that I had to make and say, this is the story of this woman. It's not about Cervantes, and it's not about Don Quixote. So it is definitely her voice. Now, in a nod to, a classic. And it's a classic that's considered the first modern novel. Every chapter heading comes with what we call a time stamp and a place stamp because of the dual timeline. And then if you see, and this is true of not just this particular book of his, but other books in that time, there's like a little, what we would call in journalism, a subhead. So I write a subhead, and I always think for anybody who studied the Quixote, would recognize it, but I don't know how many people would.
That's great. So the book is, when was it published?
In 2023.
2023, of course. It's available for sale anywhere.
Anywhere,
sold, right?
Books and Books, my, favorite bookstore, bookshop.
Go independent
.org, go independent bookstores, anywhere that
Excellent. You got another one in the works?
I do. I swore I would not write 16th century or 17th century Barcelona. Again, it's writing historical fiction was very time consuming, and
because it's fiction, but you still want to get
but I wanted accuracy, and I think that's the journalist in me. So I was reading through the ARC, so it's the advanced reader copy, and I was still going every fact, checking back through all my files. So it was until my husband said, you're driving yourself crazy. You are going to know more about this era than 99.9% of your readers.
Right.
But it was,
So it's not just me. Okay, good.
No. See, I'm sure you do. And
I have some historical elements in my book. I'm a big fan of history, and I want to get it right. Now, I have to, and I'll admit, I used AI for research, and that's been a huge help. Now, whether I got it right or not, it's an open question. But, it does help. I didn't have to travel to China. I asked AI about it. We'll see how it did when I start getting feedback.
Yeah, well, we're waiting for September.
I wrote the book myself. I want to be clear, but it is a great research tool.
Yeah, it is. I was very fortunate in the sense, of course, for the internet. You can get all kinds of books. So I was able to buy old out-of-print books about the customs of that time. I must have read at least half a dozen or more, probably, biographies of Cervantes that really was very eye-opening. And I actually applied for a research grant in, I guess it was the end of 2019, got it. And and received the monies in February 2020. And I had planned to go to Barcelona because a big part of the book takes place in
the sacrifices you have to
in
Barcelona.
I know, in Barcelona. I had all these things ready. And of course, we all know what happened in March 2020. Mm-hmm. But, like the internet, I was able to find all kinds of primary sources. Mm-hmm. So I found diaries of people. What would then have been considered the city council during that time of Barcelona kept their own minutes of daily happenings. Of course, it was written in Catalan, so that was its own thing, and I can read it. My grandparents spoke, and my mother, but unless, of course, you have to write it out. It won't do PDFs. When I was in doubt, I would ask my cousins. And so I worked through that, found, as I said, not only diaries, but weather reports, which to me was amazing.
The Spanish
travel journeys.
They catalog everything and they keep everything.
And there were travel journeys from people who were merchants who kept their travel things and would describe this in that road, don't take this, there's this in this bridge, which of course was great for me. So, that really helped. So
now you said you learned a lot about Cervantes. I'm curious, anything interesting that people may not know about him that you'd want to share?
Yes. So two things that kind of surprised me that I didn't know. And, you don't study in Spanish 4, certainly. So he had a daughter out of wedlock.
Okay. Not unusual.
No. And with a married woman who was a barmaid.
Okay.
So that was interesting. He did not marry until much, much later in life. And married somebody who was much younger. He was not very religious at the beginning of his life, but then became very religious toward the end, which is probably not unusual. And I think a lot of people like to claim him in certain ways. So some scholars, for instance, think he was probably came of Jewish descent. And that the family, several decades or even centuries later had changed their name to Cervantes. And there's many reasons why, they back up that information. But it was, you collect this information and you use 10% of it. Yeah. And it's just like fascinating.
And the rest of it just lives in your head.
Lives in your head. And it's, like, wow, look at this. So.
That's great. Now, do you have a particular writing style? Do you have a kind of a mix depending on what you're writing and who's influenced your writing?
Yeah. Well, I know for the historical fiction, especially this one, it was a real jump into the tone and the syntax of the voice. It's written in first person, and it had to be, of course, as a woman of the late 1500s and the early 1600s would think and speak in act. Now, what's interesting, in my research, this is why research, unlike AI, where you get very detailed, if you just read a lot of books, it can become just serendipity. So while reading about the customs, I found that there was a custom at that time in the Barcelona area, but other areas of northeast Spain called Puilla, in which women would take over their husband's business, run it, and that was something that was very acceptable. And it wasn't forever. It was either until they remarried or the male heir took over. So they were kind of like a placeholder. But some of these women did really well. But it was something that was essential because people died of all kinds of things. What we now take antibiotics and move right along.
Yeah.
They died, from a broken bone, from childbirth, from whatever. But also because men went out to war.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that was something that ended up playing a big role. And I learned a lot about how important the Inquisition was. Not only, I always thought of it as a religious institution, but it wasn't. It was a social, it was a legal institution. And not everybody, there were whole cities that bucked against it. It wasn't something that was acceptable, but it was imposed on people. And one of the things I learned, it wasn't originally not a Roman concept. It was started by Ferdinand and Isabel to unite the disparate kingdoms of Spain, like Catalonia, like Aragon, and, and all these other areas. So, it was just fascinating, really fascinating. What can I do with this information? Write another book, right? But it was, it's fascinating to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, and so you know a lot about Spain now, and Spain is in the finals for the World Cup.
Oh, so yeah, I've been texting my cousins over there. Yeah.
Right? It's a good time to sell the book. Spain is on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
That's great. So you're a Miami author who's written extensively about Miami as a journalist. Mm-hmm. Does any of that kind of Miami inspiration translate into any of the books in any way? And what is it about Miami that you think is unique from a writer's perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I first started writing, the literary community in Miami was very small. Mm-hmm. And it began to grow. And it was more about crime fiction. So we had, the classics. Sure. People, we know Carl Hyacin, for instance, Jim Gripando, and so on. At that time, Carolina Garcia Aguilera, but they all wrote, it was crime fiction. But thank God for people like Mitchell Kaplan and Eduardo Padron, who brought the Miami Book Fair here and just put us on the map. So let me start by saying this. So, my first two novels were set in a Miami that I know very well. I grew up here. And my collection of essays, most of them obviously were also set in Miami. So this is Dulcinea was my first foray into not only a very different century, but a different country and city altogether. And so I've been toying, even though I'm finishing up another historical novel. Actually, I'm doing the revisions for that one. I've become toying with one that's set in Miami again, and again in the neighborhood I grew up with. And I don't know why I keep
write what you know,
but I haven't lived there in over 40 years. But it's, I think it's what makes you, it's what you carry inside.
Right? Too,
so, there you have it.
So what is your take on Miami?
So, Miami, I'll complain about
those who love it most are the ones that complain about it.
Yeah, I'm sitting there and complain about the traffic. What are all these people doing here? Blah, blah, blah. Why can't anybody drive? The standard thing. Yeah. But it's my home, and it's the place that made me who I am in so many ways. I wish it were more affordable.
For sure. Yeah.
Because
my
I
kids
think
won't be able to live here.
No, none of my grandchildren live here, and part of it was affordability. Part of it was the professions they chose. The opportunities were elsewhere. Right. But I think Miami will always be my home. I end up doing a lot of traveling to see the grandchildren, of course, but it's always the thing. It's also become sometimes a city that I don't always recognize. So there'll be neighborhoods that I don't go to for long periods of time. And I'll go visit and say, wow, what happened here? Yeah. What was here? I know this wasn't here, and it was a new building. And we've become this hot, sexy city that everybody wants to go to. You know, when I travel or I go to conferences, Miami.
It's a hot brand.
Yeah, we're like a hot brand. And of course, everybody thinks I live in South Beach and go to the beach every day. And I go, no, I live in the burbs, you know.
Yeah. I don't think there is a one Miami anymore.
No.
If there ever has been. We've always been a city of neighborhoods, and it's just becoming more and more so. I mean, Brickell is very different than Doral, which is very different than Homestead, right?
Right. The one thing about when you grow up in Miami, and, you know, my husband is also a Miami, has spent his whole lifetime here, how you end up always knowing somebody who knows somebody. Your connection.
It's for a city of almost 3 million people, it's very small.
It's very small. Yeah. I am never, you know, that 6 degrees of separation, it does not exist. It's 2 degrees of separation. So, you know, in that way, it is, you know, a neighborhood of neighborhood. Yeah. So.
And you can draw endless amounts of inspiration from just, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Turning on the TV and watching the news or opening the paper, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
you read the
story
newspaper.
Writes itself here.
Yeah, exactly. You read the newspaper.
Carl's made a living off of this.
Yes. And you think, no, this can't be happening. Yeah.
Truth is
but it is. And there's always a Miami connection, even national stories.
Always.
You're like, oh, no.
I mean, from Watergate, you know, it's always been that way. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's fun. We get to live in this fascinating city.
Oh, yeah.
And complain about the traffic.
Yeah.
So any advice for writers as we kind of come to a close here?
Yeah, I always tell writers there are 2 things that are very important. You know, obviously you need talent, but talent, to be honest with you, I think is kind of inflated if you don't have the other 2. Right. One is persistence. And the truth is you can have a lot of talent, but if you don't have the self-discipline and persistence to put your butt in the chair, you're not going to get anywhere. And persistence is what will carry you over the many rejections. You can be successful, you can have been published, but you will be rejected, and you will be rejected repeatedly. Yeah. And I think that's very hard. And I see a lot of young writers who quit. You know, they try, they do, and then they give it up. Yeah. And I read and I don't know how true this is, that more than 60 and probably more than 70% of first-time writers never write a second book.
Right. That's why I promised myself from the beginning this is going to be a 9-volume series to force myself.
And you have to keep to that. You have to keep to that.
I've said it publicly, so I have to do it now.
And the other is read. I'm surprised by, you know, sometimes I go talk to writers groups and do this, and I'm surprised at how many people don't actually read within the genre they're writing it or read. I'm a very eclectic reader, so I read thrillers, and probably because of my journalism background. And that surprises me because especially if you don't have a creative writing background, as I do not, I didn't go to school for that, this is how you learn, is by deconstructing what the great writers have.
And I admitted to you before the show that I haven't had a chance to read, and it's driving me insane, but just between my day job and writing and trying
to
self-publish and this show, it's just I don't have the time, and I do have to get back to it. But you know, I love what you said about being an eclectic reader. I find that in this day and age, people are kind of just pigeonholing themselves into one very specific genre or even subgenre of a subgenre, and they only stick to that. And you know, my book is kind of a genre blending novel, and as a result, I don't think a publisher would ever be interested because I'm covering too many genres. And in the market today, everyone just kind of sticks to one.
Sticks to that little pigeonhole.
That would drive me bad. I love biographies. I love historical fiction. I love action adventure. I love thrillers. And so I don't know if it's the market that's kind of pushing people into those silos, or if it's just, has it always been the case, or is that a more modern phenomenon? I don't know, because it's only been recently that I've tried to school myself more in the publishing world. Before, I didn't have time. You know, I was raising children, trying to make them go here, do all these things. And, as they left home and I had less responsibility, I began to learn more about publishing. I think it's more so now, and I don't know why. And it seems that we chase the latest fashion. So like now romantasy is hot. Well, if you don't write romance or you don't write fantasy, the other thing I've heard is historical fiction plus. So it has to be historical fiction plus, in a thriller, or historical fiction with a romance. But I've learned so much as far as pacing by reading thrillers. I have a friend who I actually met on the internet, a fellow writer that we keep in touch with, and she started as a historical fiction writer. And she pivoted to thrillers, and she is extremely successful now with thrillers. That's great.
So, people don't have to be stuck in one thing.
Life is more interesting when you make
And you do learn from others, how other people do and write. Yeah.
Well, Ana, unbelievably, we're out of time, because I know we could have continued this conversation. And when you finish your next book, we'll have you back to talk some more. Any last words? Well, just, for the writers out there, butt in the chair. And, I always tell them that. And for readers, keep reading and let the authors, your favorite authors, know it's a very lonely profession. We spend months without hearing from readers. Sometimes we go hours and hours without speaking to people. So, keep reading and keep writing. Yeah. Bobby, you stole my tagline. I love it. I should have trademarked it. And I agree with you, by the way. I think writers need community. And that was actually the subject of our previous episode here with the South Florida Writers Association. So it doesn't have to be a lonely profession. Find others who write and can not only keep you company, but actually teach you a lot, right? About writing and about the larger ecosystem. That's how we connected with somebody you had here before. I love it. That I immediately emailed to ask for information on. Writers helping writers. That's right. Well, folks, that is all. Oh, wait, one last thing. I can't believe we forgot. What is your website? So my website is so you can tell my age. And my name, Ana Veciana-Suarez.com. No dash. Okay. Excellent. And I'm easily findable. If you just put my name in it, including all kinds of old stories from the past. Fantastic. Well, Ana, thank you so much for being on the program. I appreciate it. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a delight. Thank you. And folks, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and keep following us here on the Miami Book Hub. We have some great guests coming up. I also want to thank Miami's community newspapers and our producer, Priscilla, behind the screen there, for producing our program. We do appreciate it. And so we'll see you next time. And until then, keep reading, keep writing, and stay curious, Miami.